Warning, the following is intended for restless patrons only. Matt and Michael are pastors, but they probably are not your pastor, and none of what you hear should be taken as direct pastoral counsel, and the laughter should tell you that this isn't financial advice. Listener discretion is advised.
For about a week, on PCA Twitter, people argued about deaconesses in our denomination. It was quickly, the topic was changed today when it was revealed M&A had put out a blog post instructing illegal immigrants on how not to be identified by the federal government as such. So that changed everyone's... Pastor Michael is just...
What is going on? Also, how much money are we taking from USAID? I'm scared. I'm scared to know.
I don't know, man. So here's the deal. And so a patron sent us a nice thread about this whole deaconess thing in the PCA. But that thread was deleted, and so we can't discuss that. But I think we should go ahead and say it is there are apparently this is a large controversy of deaconesses in the PCA. Now, here's the question. Well, what do we do? What do we think? Right. I actually think on this issue, let me just say this as we talk about this. I actually think the idea of a female deacon biblically on the issues of men and women in the church is actually about as close to marginal of an issue. This is not, right, the idea of like, this is not analogous to a woman preaching or a woman being a pastor. Those are so obviously unbiblical. I think there is actual real controversy over the idea of a woman. And by the way, I'm about to end this whole thing with me being against it in the PCA. So before someone goes, we got him, we found him.
Got another one.
Yeah, he's been wanting to defend this the whole time.
Matt gets us.
That's right. I get all of us. But the reason this is marginal is what the ESV, for example, translates the wives of deacons is the word women. And they're women, the deacons, and their women should, and then it gives qualifications. There is no analogy for that when it comes to elders. There is no, and they're women. And so there does seem to be a reasonable question of why does Paul talk about women in regards to the diaconate, or the wives of deacons in regards to the diaconate in a way he wouldn't to the wives of elders.
Yep.
Obviously, for example, here's the Roman Catholic solution. No elder, no priest is married,
Yep.
right? That would be part of their solution. Obviously, there are problems with that for other reasons, because he still talks about their household and their children, right? There's a lot of that sounds like convincing for about 2 seconds.
That convinces a lot of people that have never read the Bible.
Exactly, right. But there is something going on with women there that is not. Now, so yeah, I guess I'll let you react to this idea of this, even just this being a more marginal issue in my mind on the biblical basis. Before we
on a biblical basis, I think you could say that there's a level to which there's more room for debate.
Yeah.
Right. When it comes to like a female elder, there's zero biblical room for debate. There really is not. Like there's zero. Now people will say, of course, what about that? What about these others? But when it comes to the issue of deaconesses, yes, there's more room for debate. However, right, how I would want to frame it though, is that almost anybody that is strongly pushing for this, especially where it doesn't already exist, is almost because of our cultural context, they're almost definitely doing it because they have been in some way influenced by feminism.
Sure. Yeah.
Almost definitely. I don't think that you can get away from that. And so Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, they think this is a line that they can push in regards to men and women.
Yep.
And so
they're going to take it. That's what this is why it always becomes a big deal, by the way. It's not because there's a bunch of like conservative guys going around and they're like all they care about is whether or not there's female deacons. That's not what usually happens, right? Now, it's funny to say that because in this case, literally a guy in the PCA did just research by going to all these different PCA websites and saw who's all listed as a deacon, including women on some PCA pages, right? And so this did come because a guy went out of his way to do that, but that's because this has been a consistent, like, pushed issue, right? It's not because this comes out of nowhere. Hey, I'm just going to have fun and go see if anybody's got female deacons today. But because this has been a consistent issue where we know that there's guys who have literally said on the floor of General Assembly in the PCA, hey, we don't ordain any deacons because we think women should be ordained as deacons. And as long as we can't do that, we're just going to completely disregard the Book of Church Order and not ordain any deacons at all. So what does that tell you? That tells you that there are a lot of guys, or at least some, right? And I think it's a lot more than we'd like to admit, that want to push this line. It's very important to them. And then you have to ask, why is it important? Because as you and I just said, yeah, there might be some room here, but it's not like a make it or break it issue in the church, in the sense that, like, if this isn't happening, then oh boy, right? Like we pull out all the stops. This is the worst thing that could ever happen. No, even if you take women to be deaconesses in 1 Timothy 3, which even that doesn't necessarily, by the way, mean ordained deacons. But even if you did take it to mean that, even if you meant to mean ordained female deacons, that wouldn't make it wrong to have an all-male diaconate.
Right.
That, like, even that, it wouldn't, in other words, it would never be necessarily sinful to not have women as deacons, even if it was allowable.
Yes.
Okay, now, I don't think it is allowable. I don't think it is right. I think for the vast majority of guys pushing this, it is because of the cultural pressure, and they want some kind of way to justify to the culture. Look at us, and when I say culture, I mean within their church too, right? Like to show people, look at us, like we also have women doing this, so we're good, right? We're some of the good guys because we don't just have men doing this historically male job.
and this is, and so I do think that I'll say, to the defense of conservative Presbyterians, they have wrestled through the inclusion of women in that list. This is why the way that the PCA's Book of Church Order handles it is by creating diaconal assistants. Because it basically says something like, it's sometimes expedient for godly men and women to be chosen to help with the deacons. And again, you could imagine how a man could do this. I live next door to a widow in my church. Whenever she needs her lawn mowed or it snows, Matt, we need you to go and can you do this?
Yeah.
Obviously that could be the work of the deacons, and that would be fine. It would be totally appropriate, but it's also fine for them to ask me.
By the way, let's just stop for a minute. I think that, like, this shows, number one, the legalism that is so common in our circles, that it's like, well, if it's not in the book, I can't ask somebody to help me as a deacon. That's so absurd. But it also shows one of the problems, and one of the reasons why I think there's so many men that are like, well, we have to lay hands on and have deaconesses that, no, they're not ordained, but we commission them to their work. Why do you have to do that? It's because we're the kinds of people that want to be seen.
Of course.
We want a platform. We want people to look at us. We want people to know that we're the ones helping to do this. Look at me. I can do this. Well, guess what? If that's your spirit, you shouldn't be a deacon.
Right. And because no one wants the assistant to the regional manager title, right? Like, oh, all those women, we're so happy that they're willing to serve your church. It sounds like you should just explain to them that they are assistant to the deacons. They are, and that is exactly what our church would have.
I don't, and I'm sure I will run into this, but there are a lot of women that do what we would call mercy ministry, diaconal work, even alongside of the deacons in our church.
Yeah.
I have never once had somebody say, why don't you bring me up front and commission me for this?
Right.
No, it's like, what are you talking about?
Of course.
Do you not realize how far we have gotten away from what it actually means to serve the church, right? To be a servant, a deacon of the church, if that's the mentality we have. And I know everybody will say that's not my mentality at all. Yes, it is.
Because the actual reason you want you want deacons is so that they can do the work to what is the church body supposed to be doing when we're not the ones making budgets, teaching the word, making these decisions? You're supposed to be being the body of Christ. We've taken every responsibility from you so you can simply be the body of Christ according to your giftings. That's what we want you to do. And that involves, of course, service, ministry, love, evangelism, right? All of these things are what God has made you to do. And
why would it be necessary to be recognized before you do something like go and visit a widow in the church?
Right.
Why is that necessary?
Right.
Why? I actually don't even understand.
The only reason you would need to be recognized. The only reason you would need it formally is the deacons are aware of a need and they would ask someone to help with it. That'd be the only reason. That's not a reason.
Why can't they just do that then?
There's
right? This is my problem with then we have to construct this extra thing called deacon assistants in our book. Why? Because we're legalists. Because we're like, well, if it doesn't say it, then can I even do it?
Right.
Yes. I mean, yeah. Just don't flout the scriptural commands.
Right.
But you don't need every little jot and tittle of what you do to be like prescribed for you.
But how do you put it on the website?
So many things I haven't thought about that I want to rant about with you.
But how do you put it on a website if you just do those things? If you just but because here's the actual reason this actually is as Pastor Michael mentioned, ordination. Like, this is actually a secondary secret fight over ordination. And this is simply people who have decided if their solution is we won't ordain any deacons, or we will list people as deacons, or whatever. This is I don't know. Again, I've just already granted there could be a biblical argument against the position I'm telling you our church holds. There is not a biblical argument for just saying I'm going to join this church and then I'm going to basically rebel against it. And do it in a way that the church has said, well, we believe in the ordaining of deacons. Obviously, we don't believe in women's ordination. And so, we have divided those things. And you have now decided to actually fight against both of these things. A church you of free voluntary will joined. And then 2, you're fighting against an obviously biblical position, right? So that's why it becomes a big deal. That's why it becomes more than just Tim Keller and Ligon Duncan sitting down and having a discussion over what do you think the biblical, language of deacon refers to in the New Testament. So go back to whatever you were talking about, because I think this is why it matters here.
Yeah, I just think that this very debate shows how far off base we are. And I know most people, even though we started saying, hey, there could be like a reasonable way to discuss this, not saying there's only one way to see what the Bible says about this, right? But why has it become such a sticking point? Why has it become something that everybody's fighting about in a denomination that's already said, hey, we don't do that? It's because you're trying to push this, right? That's it. And this is what I keep coming back to when it comes to this is it is so not in keeping with the office of deacon or the giftings of a true deacon to be in a position where you're like, I need to be recognized this way. It's not at all in keeping with what a deacon is supposed to be.
Right.
Every deacon that I've known, like, the best deacons I've known have not been people who were asked to be a deacon and then they began to serve and care for others, or they were caring for other people in the church in some way, serving other people in the church, and then they were like, hey, how come I'm not a deacon? Right? If someone ever came to me and said, I should be a deacon, that's number one red flag. They should not be a deacon.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that that's happening across the board, right? I think a lot of this is like, there's a bunch of like guys who they wouldn't consider themselves progressive pastors, but they've been heavily influenced by feminism, not realizing it. And they're like, if we don't recognize women as part of this, then in some way we are sinning or we're doing something wrong. It's not true.
Right.
Even if you were right about the biblical arguments, it wouldn't be true. Right? Even if you were right that this was allowable, it wouldn't be true that if you don't make this a visible part of who you are as a church, that you have deaconesses, you have these women serving, it still wouldn't. Maybe another way to look at this is such an like outward facing thing too. So often this is done so that those outside of the church perceive us in the right way. Or so those who are outside of the faith, but they come to our church for the first time. So they like what we do and they're not offended by the fact that it's just men. It's outward facing. But even that, right? To use the deacon, what is a deacon for? It's for service first to the household of God, right? Like that's where it begins. And then it moves outward. But if you begin outward facing, then again, you've already begun to cut yourself off from the very fundamental piece of what a deacon is. So on so many levels, it just seems like this debate shows how bad off things are. It's actually, we're in a pretty bad way if this is something that has to keep coming up over and over and over again like it does.
Yeah, I think so. And so Pastor Michael, so then the question becomes, so what do we do? What do we do in our beloved denomination?
So we're working on it. We have been pushing forward overtures that continue to define things well. Then the next step, like as far as, should you refer to somebody as a deacon if they're not an ordained man? No, you shouldn't, right? That's now in our book of church order. Okay, now we have to start using that, right? When we find out that there's women who are being called deacons in our churches, even if they say, well, they're not ordained, then we need to start applying discipline to those churches, right? That's not okay. And beyond that, I think it's good. Anytime we have these public, these kind of public discussions about it, I think that's good too. Simply to get out there, okay, why is this actually coming up? Why do you really, really want this? Why is this such an important thing for you that you keep bringing it up all the time? Why is it that you want something that has not been common in the Reformed and Presbyterian world? Even if I won't say it's non-existent, why is this something you're pushing when you're in a denomination that clearly has not been in favor of this? It's those sorts of things that I think it's actually good to move that way, to push this out, because it's not just an issue, by the way, of, well, as long as you get a couple pastors out of here who are preaching this or whatever, right, or who like this sort of thing. Really, it's a matter of actually training people how to read and understand Scripture and then apply it well within the church. And so this gives us an opportunity to do that. Let's walk through. Why would it make sense, by the way, that deacons might have their wives involved in the work that they're doing, whereas elders wouldn't?
Mm.
That's a good question. Have you ever asked that? Like, as you're reading that text, you who are listening, have you ever just asked why, if it's true that this is talking about wives, right? If that's true, why is that? Because what a lot of people do is, well, that doesn't make sense. Okay, so it must not mean that.
Right.
Okay, just think for more than a second about it. Could it make sense? Right? Again, being in a culture where it's not so feminist as ours, where it's like, well, we're all interchangeable people. Men and women can meet and talk all the time. A single man and a single woman can just, interact with each other all the time. You can have a deacon regularly going all by himself to meet with this, a single mom to, give her cash and, make sure she's taken care of. Can you see why maybe it would be beneficial to have wives involved in that process?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, what are the primary duties of an elder, according to Paul and Timothy? Can you understand why wives wouldn't be included in that work? Right? In the preaching of the word, right? In the ruling of the church, right? In governing over the church. Can't you see how wives wouldn't? That's not like a part of what the wives are doing, right? That's not something that would happen. So even this, because I've talked to a lot of guys who know the Bible, right? And are even like generally conservative guys, but they're like, well, it doesn't make sense that women would be included in deacons and not elders. It takes about 5 seconds to think carefully about it and realize, oh, this actually makes a lot of sense. Again, even more so when you go into a first century context where the distinction between men and women was much clearer and much stronger, and how you interacted socially was much different than it is today. Way clearer, right? So all I'm saying in this rant is I think it's good that we discuss it, because I think as you discuss it, you realize, oh, it makes way more sense to just say, no, this is a role for men. It's an ordained office.
Yep. It
should be given to men, because women should not hold authority of any kind in the church. And that doesn't exclude, quote unquote, women, right? I mean, it does in a sense, but it doesn't stop you from using your gifts. This is what if somebody has the gifts of service, then use them, right? Why do you have to be recognized for it? Why do you have to be leading in it? That very heart shows how much that kind of feminist thinking has infiltrated our thought processes in the church.
Yes. Well, everybody, this has been us discussing Deaconesses. Thanks for supporting the show. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you for supporting the Restless Podcast. We can make the show because you support. Matt and Michael would love to hear from you if you want to reach out. And remember, what you hear behind the paywall stays behind the paywall.